Our next speaker is Mr. Kurt Lorenzi. Mr. Lorenzi is currently the VP of Global Sourcing for Winery Exchange, where he has been since 2000. WX Brands offers a unique portfolio of wine brands sourced from 14 different countries that are then sold in 20 countries, resulting in over 4 million cases sold worldwide. Previously, Kurt has served as the winemaker and master distiller at Jepson Vineyards and as the winemaker at Estrella River Winery. Over his career, Kurt has accumulated countless awards, not only as a winemaker, but also as a distiller and a brewer. This morning, Kurt will be sharing his insights with us on if you have what it takes to be a private label supplier. Mr. Kurt Lorenzi, everyone.
I wore flats today.
Good, makes one of us. Clicker for you right there.
So welcome everybody. I had the unique, or not so unique, San Francisco experience this morning. I walked out to get my car after having spent the night with my daughter in the city, and my car window is shattered. And so that's put me off a bit, so if you bear with me today, I'll try and get through this, this talk. Let's see. So I'm going to date myself, but back in 1984, as part of a company that developed the first private label program for Darden restaurant groups, which is Olive Garden and a number of other restaurants, and we thought we had it made. But as we got into it, we found out that there were challenges at every place we turned, whether it was distribution, licensing, delivery. And my piece as a winemaker actually turned out to be the simplest of all of them. And the company went on to develop additional small private label for small regional restaurant chains. We had a series of retailers throughout the Midwest. And each time we learned something new from our experience. It's challenging, was one of the things that we found. But we built the business to a point where we were able to sell it off to a major California winery. And then fast forward to 2000, and WX, or formerly known as Winery Exchange, had just started. And they brought me in to help build a specific private label business. So what I've learned over all those years is this is not a simple business. And my guess is that it's that experience and this gray hair that Sid, or motivated him to ask me to share some thoughts with you. And rather than give you answers, I'm going to pose a series of questions that if you're not in the private label business, you should consider if you're getting into it. First off, all business, and specifically private label, is like filling a leaky bucket. You're losing SKUs, you're losing customers out the bottom because there's no permanency to this business. So you're constantly filling it from the top, and that's one thing to keep in mind as you're going through this. And that's a saying that one of my colleagues informed me of the other day, that if you haven't lost a brand, you just haven't been in the business long enough. What I hope is some of what I share with you will help you put a few Band-Aids in some of those holes. So demand for exclusive brands and private label is growing. The world market for private label products is growing, and beverage alcohol is riding that wave. In Europe, where the retail market is dominated by large chains, Carrefour, Aldi, Asda, Tesco, Sainsbury's, they've had a long history of private label. And you can see that there's a significant portion of the wine and spirits portfolio that is private label. In the US, though, we've been slower to embrace this. We're a very brand-dominated company and culture. So we're now at somewhere between 8 to 10% market penetration, and that's growing. What I find most interesting, though, is in recent development, if you look at online sales, which is everything from wine clubs, and in fact, Cooper's Hawk is a great example of a company that's developed their own brands to sell exclusively to their customers. The Wall Street Journal has a Wine of the Month Club. Some of that is private label. Naked Wines is making a huge foray into the United States. Again, focused on own brands, private label. And then lastly, Oops. Lastly, on-trade. And on-trade is now growing again. After years of having just pretty interesting, at best, house wine, they've gotten into a portfolio of spirits, of cocktails, of wines, and that is also growing business. So the market is bigger than it's ever been and continues to grow. We see there's opportunity. So understanding the market, sorry. So what is your motivation? Sorry, I'm a little shook up here. What is your motivation for actually getting into this business? Your motivation will inform your choices, your resources, the customers you approach, and there's a lot of different ones. The easiest one right now is to look to sell off your excess. And so if you're a winery in California today, you know we're in a difficult climate. If you're a winery abroad, this has been a situation now and again where there's excess wine and you can't sell everything you have produced under your own brand. You look at a couple options. And Steve Dorfman is gonna, from Ciati Company, will talk to you about some of those, which will be selling wine in bulk. But private label is another option. So it helps you balance your inventory. A couple things to consider though is it takes time, it takes resources. When a market is long like today, you'll approach a customer and you'll be taking a number to get in line to offer them something because this is a common place where people go. What happens when there's no more excess? What happens when you no longer in a position that you need to or want to supply that? You've already invested time and money in these sales. You're going to let that go away. Something to consider. Certainly another is to look at, the channels. So develop alternate sales channels is another strategy. And that's ongoing. It's different than just selling your bulk. So it's having a regular piece of your business, which is I'm going to have private label as a piece. I'm going to have some customers. I'm going to be reaching out to them. And that's another way to go. That takes some of the pressure off your primary brand, which for most of us in the US is a very important piece. It's our biggest asset. And then lastly, develop an ongoing relationship with strategic customers. And there's a number of other companies, wineries in the United States and around the world that have taken this as part of the business strategy. And we've worked over the last 20 years to develop a partnership or partnerships around the world with some of the best retailers. And this takes a significant investment of time and resources to do so. From concept through delivery on the shelf, we've worked collaboratively to develop brands that we can sell exclusively through these retail partners and work with them to develop the categories. So understand the market you're going into. It's an important piece. You can't go in blind. You can't go in just because you have wine and something you think works in the marketplace. It's more challenging today. Look at trends. Recently, a couple of trends have been on packaging. Understand that. Is it cans? Is it bag-in-a-box? It could be new bottles. It could be different shapes. Those are all trends. Another is to consider price. Of course, price is the piece that we are ultimately going to be tasked with to make a retailer successful. They need to have some price benefit. Margin is really important to them. One of the primary reasons for having a private label is for a retailer to gain extra margin. They're not going to be out there competing on a brand that is on ad at the corner store down the street for them at $2 less. It's a primary motivation. So you need to understand what their requirements are. Are they going to ask you to participate in the promotion of it? Build that into your price. And then finally, look at what are the varietals and regions that are trending these days, because it's ever shifting, and you may have a strategic piece of this. If we look at Chardonnay and Cabernet Sauvignon are two of the largest categories still today. It's a great place to trade, but it's also quite crowded. Rosé over the last 5 years has been on fire and still continues to grow. How long that'll go, nobody knows. What I hear from our retail customers, they don't see any end in sight. And then there's things like lower alcohol, spritzers. That's a trend that we've seen over the last year. So there's an ever-changing business out there, and there's an opportunity to take a piece of that. What you need to understand is where your wines fit in that marketplace, because that's part of your presentation. Being informed and talking to your customer about that is an important aspect of success. And then what are your strengths? Know that going in. What's your competitive advantage? And don't tell me it's great wine. What we see is every year the quality of wine in the world is improving. And it's amazing to see what can be bought and had at very inexpensive prices around the world. We're no longer in a one-country market, we're in a global market. And that's the way retailers see it, and that's where we have to all compete. Your strength may be design and packaging. Those are clear differentiators. Your strength could also be your location or appellation. I mean, most recently, just in the last month, we've seen Santa Lucia Highlands, which is a well-known appellation in Monterey for Pinot Noir, come down in price where it competes with greater Monterey County. That's a distinct advantage for a product and or for the retailer that you're selling it to. That's value. And an often overlooked strategy or strength is operational efficiency. Being able to turn a product around quickly, efficiently, get it into market is an advantage for you with any retailer. And then once you've identified a category, varietal, price point, you should understand the competition. Identify the top-selling national brands in your category. Get those wines, look at the packaging, blind taste them to make sure that you're competitive, because that's how a consumer is going to see it, and certainly it's going to be how your customer is going to see it. Know where you stand, and that's part of your decision to where you're going to compete. So who are your target customers and how are they differentiated? I mean, this is an important piece because not everyone can approach all customers throughout the world. What's the differentiation? If you look at Trader Joe's, Walmart, and Total Wines & More, three very different retailers here in the US, and they function differently. Their demographic, their customers are different, and the way they go to market is different. And you need to understand that because you've got to supply them. Points of distribution are one. So understand how many stores they have, where the location of the stores are, and how many of them actually sell alcohol beverage. So Trader Joe's and Total Wines & More are, all stores sell alcohol beverage. Less than 50% of Walmart do. It's still a huge number, but understand that. You need to have coverage and distribution to be able to service those. Level of service and distribution is another aspect. Are your customers serviced by regional warehouses, clearing distributors, or full service distributors? And do you have that in place? Total Wines relies, actually I'll start with Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's is probably the simplest. Trader Joe's has a depot, and they have depots in several locations. They have captive wholesalers. You deal directly with them, and you don't touch the wine in the stores. You're not part of that promotion. Your job ends getting them great value, great product, and making sure you get it there on time. Walmart, on the other hand, requires full service distributors, and they're in a lot of states. So you need to have a network that can supply that can merchandise on the shelf. They'll ask for promotional funds. You need to be in a position to provide that. And then Total Wines & More, somewhat in between. They're heavily reliant on Deutz, who provides them with both a depot and distributor network. They will promote brands. They'll rely on you for some of that, and they'll take in-store tasting. So the level of service is important when you're looking at this as well. And then, is it private label or exclusive brands? What's their focus? So private label is often referred to as store brands. Trader Joe's is a classic example. Trader Joe's has a brand. Kirkland Signature at Costco, which is actually, we were the first producer of Kirkland Signature wines back in the early 2000s, developed a series of spirits with them as well. We had actually started with an exclusive brand prior to that, and they decided that Kirkland Signature is a powerful name and that it had benefit to having that in front of the consumer, and they certainly have proven that point. Exclusive brands are often not identified directly with the store or store's name. And a customer could have both. Trader Joe's has Charles Shaw, one of the largest private labels or exclusive brands, I shouldn't say private label, exclusive brands that's out there. We developed Criterion, which is a high-end exclusive brand for Whole Foods, and Storyteller at Kroger. Those are all brands that stand on their own. They're not associated by the customer with the store brand, but they certainly are only available there exclusively. So designing for success is a key to this as well. And this is an example of one of the brands that we've designed, which is Criterion. It's a series of wines from top appellations around the world, which are really the iconic appellation and character of that wine. We developed it in conjunction with Devin Broley, who is Master Sommelier and one of the buyers for Whole Foods. So when you're designing for success, once you've identified the market, the product, the price point, and a customer, what are the resources that you need to be successful? The easiest route to market seems to be private label. You don't have to do the design work. They've done the heavy lifting. You should just get the artwork, put it on your bottle, make sure it looks good, and move on. But those can be some of the most exacting. These are brands that the customer cares about deeply, whether that's Tesco with Tesco's Finest, or Sainsbury's with Taste the Difference, or Costco with Kirkland Signature. The requirements are extreme, oftentimes more so than an exclusive brand. So what are your capabilities for design? You need to keep that in mind. Is it something that you outsource, or is it something that you can do in-house? A compelling package is extremely important to success today, because oftentimes the store is not going to have you merchandised the way that you might do it as your own brand. And so it sits on the shelf, and how do you differentiate between yours and everybody else's? Once you've got a compelling design, compliance is essential. And we're a litigious society in the United States, so you need to make sure that there's a trademark. If you're going to assign this brand to a retailer, they don't want to have somebody coming back to them with legal action. God knows we've been in that position enough times, and fortunately we've done the homework that we can defend that for them. But that's an important piece. TTB approval, and then state registrations. You need to be able to get the product to the market and guarantee that that can happen. And pricing. So pricing that provides an acceptable margin to the customer is essential. The rationale for having that is, as I said before, one of the primary reasons for having private label. And finally, the wine. And that should have been the first thing that we all think about. And I'm a winemaker, but I know over the years that I can see it's one of the last things. It is important. It's important in that it's going to get the customer coming back. And so you and your winemaker think you've got great wine. Your job is prove it. Taste it against the competition. Taste it against the national brands. Make sure that when you walk in the door to make that presentation, you've got a compelling story and why and how your wine compares with anybody else's. So once you've accomplished all that, you've made your presentation, you've done your due diligence, you sit with the customer, and you're successful. You've got the deal. And it's a chance to celebrate, which is a wonderful thing. But wait, they'll have a few questions. And this is where things get difficult. So today, retailers are far more interested in ensuring that they have minimal risk and that you're able to supply. Do you have guaranteed source of supply? Do you have it in your vineyards? Do you have contracts? We had a major customer the other day approach us and ask us, how do we guarantee that this is not only sustainable, but that it's something that can grow significantly? And that's part of the design of the program. Look at quality systems, and it's ever important today that you have a quality system in place. More retailers are asking today for GFSI certification, for you to pass an external audit. You need to know, do you have ISO, do you have HACCP? What are your quality systems in place? They're going to want to know, and it's an important piece of the business. And then finally, your customers expect on-time delivery. Can you deliver it in time? We've had a number of incidents in this classic where we started and they said they want the wine on they want the wine on March 1st for a store reset, and they finally made up their mind in December on what the package should be. And that doesn't give you a lot of time to execute. There's no excuse for not getting it there on time. On time delivery of the package that was designed, of the quality of wine that the retailer agreed to, is essential for success. If you don't do that, you'll be out in an instant. This is not an easy business. And so I pose questions. There are a lot of people who have been successful in it, and I hope some of those are helpful to you as you think about the private label business. It's an exciting business. We've grown it over the years, and I still love it. So thank you. I appreciate the time.
Coming around with a mic.
Thanks, Kurt. This is great. Question about exclusive brands and how do retailers look at ownership versus your company's ownership? How do they approach that? I get private labels, but with exclusive brands. Do you have any ownership in those brands?
So it runs the gamut. Early on, we had developed some exclusive brands for Albertsons when the chain was nationwide. And after a few years, they looked at it and said, look, they needed to own the brands. And so we licensed the brands to them. We've had a number of other retailers where we own the brands, but we have obviously an arrangement where they get it exclusively. And that's actually, from a retailer standpoint, that's a dilemma. Because recently, Texas is still debating this, but you cannot have a private label or exclusive brand in that market. You need to be able to sell it to anyone who wants to order it. So there's always a change between, do you want to own it? Do you want to have it? It's a business relationship.
Any other questions? We have time for a few more if we have any. Yep.
From when you talk about retailers, and do you see, and I know price is important for a retailer and margins are important, but do you see retailers, especially the likes of Trader Joe's and Whole Foods, starting to get a little more brand conscious versus just versus caring just about the price in terms of building those private label brands and investing in building those brands with you?
So price isn't the only thing. If you look at, there's premiumization going on right now, and that's actually one of the things that retailers are looking at. How do they participate in that growth in the upscale market? And so it's not all about price. It needs to be value. If you're going to have a private label offering, in general, it has to be better value than the adjacency on the shelf. So there are people, Aldi has an incredible program overseas where I've seen them do development 2 years out on new products coming in. We have a couple retailers here who are looking at having upscale programs. It's not all about price, it's about staking a point in the marketplace, point of differentiation for their customers to come in and have something that they can't get elsewhere. That is the second piece of private label exclusive brands, which is really important. You can go into that store, you can only get the wine there, and that is an important piece.
Oh, wait.
Inventories is a very dicey piece. We have a full-time team of probably 5 people that analyzes store depletions where possible. We get that information, so you want to see what's selling through. You're working with distributors, they need to hold inventory. If I'm a retailer, I don't want to sign up for specific inventory. So it's a conversation. There's actually no perfect world. Sometimes we'll have contracts with people that they'll take it over a period of time, especially if there's long-term development. But in general, it's a risk that you need to take.
We have time for one more question, if anyone has one. I think, yep,
Okay.
right over here.
Here's a mic
Bringing a
for you,
mic, one moment.
So we do know that we have the 3 tier. We're an importer, and we have import wines from Europe. How would you say the price premium per bottle of private label really offers, given the 3-tier market we have here in the States?
I'm not sure that I completely understand. So you're saying, how does that work out on pricing?
Generally, how much value in terms of price margin would a private label generally provide?
It varies. I mean, Trader Joe's has one view on what they consider an acceptable margin. At the other end, there are people who are looking at, 40, 50% margin on their products, and that may or may not include promotion on top of that. So it's a wide range, which is why you need to understand the individual customer first before you can go in and make that offer. Best thing is, do a survey. Walk through the stores, see who the competitors are. If you're importing, you know who they are, you know what their prices are, and you can pretty much determine what the cost should be.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kurt.